Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is the session that you want after lunch. It's going to be super engaging, and this is a participatory session for that purpose, so you can keep it moving, keep it moving. Panelists, I'm going to encourage you to ask the audience questions so that they stay engaged. Audience, I'm going to encourage you to have comments and questions for the panelists. My name is Daryl Johnson. I'm with the Mid-States Minority Supplier Development Council. I am the program director for our Accelerate 100 Plus program. We have 154 companies in our accelerator, and some of them are even on the stage today. So I appreciate them accepting the call. Thank you so much. Today, Patricia Musariri, been practicing. Musariri is going to be our moderator today. She has a company called In Trends. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. They help successfully manage, optimize, and simplify large, complex, mission-critical projects. So if you even remotely understand what that means, you know that means when you're in the crap and it's mission-critical time and you don't have time for the wrong person, you need In Trends. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Patricia.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Yes, please contact us if you have any mission-critical needs. We're here for you. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is my first moderation, so bear with me. Hope I do a decent job. Let's start out by introducing our panel. I'm going to have you all introduce yourselves. So perhaps we can start with Karen.
I'm Karen Young. I'm saying hi to those in the corner that are hiding behind the podium for my view.
Can they hear you?
And I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 17 years. My own practice, Hayes Young Law. For the last 4 years, I've been in private practice, and my background is large corporate law. And so I currently work with corporations and nonprofits of all shapes and sizes with all different issues. And a lot of the times that's employment issues for companies and with not-for-profits. And I did a lot of research and tracking all of the COVID stimulus packages and furloughs and PPP and all of that dealt a lot with employee matters. And so the last few years have been almost exclusively employee focused with business issues. And so I'm here to keep you all legal.
Thank you, Karen. I love it. Sonal
Chef Zawahri, another interesting name. Hi, I'm Sonal. I am an author, speaker, trainer, and coach. My focus is an emotional intelligence strategist and DEI strategist around emotional intelligence. And I also am an author of my book, Have You Stretched Today? So I teach people and organizations how to step out of their comfort zone, and I give them the tool to the how part. Like, how do you actually do that? And it's a workbook. So I come from a background of education. I spent my first 20 plus years in teaching high school and college, and then transitioned into this after being in corporate and being in all of the spaces in the world. This is my fourth reinvention, and so that's what allows me to be here with you today, to be able to provide a perspective on the human element, because I love humans and I love developing culture.
Fantastic. Alicia.
Hello, I'm Alicia McKoy, founder and CEO of Peak Mind. Peak Mind uses data in a unique way. We are the bridge somewhat between artificial intelligence, which if you sat in that panel, and HR. And so it's an interesting day for us to talk about how we bring different coping skills and techniques to the workplace. So emotional intelligence experts like Sonal are in our platform, and our platform is for workers all across the globe, helping them empower employees to thrive and lower workplace stress. And I've been in corporate America for over 20 years, designing corporate spaces, and from that knowledge, looking at a lot of data of how cultures exist and how we can reinvent them. And so we're putting that into a technology called Peak Mind, and that technology then helps to supplement when coaches aren't standing in front of you. You've got the technology, and then it may remind you to call a coach and look at other action steps to help lower workplace stress.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. I'm Geneva Taylor, and I'm president and founder of TELUS Executive Search. And I guess you could say I'm a reformed engineer turned recruiter. I have a degree in electrical engineering. I've never done a day of that in my life, and I spent 30 years in corporate America in supply chain. We're search consultants who care because I really try to work with my clients to put myself in their shoes and what they're looking for in their candidates. Our placement ratio is usually like 3 to 1. Like we'll present 3 candidates, you're going to hire at least one of them. Business for 6 years, we do attract diverse candidates. I can't really say I promote that we just put intentionality in finding diverse candidates, and they are attracted to come talk to us. So 1/3 of our candidates have been diverse over the last 6 years, and I work in the manufacturing and supply chain and engineering space and technology space. So those are our the things that I used to do and hire people working for me, now I do for my clients. So it's a lot of fun because nobody, except for my daughter, understands or cares about what engineers love to talk about, but I do. So that's what we do, and we're nationwide.
Great. Thank you, Geneva. John?
Hello, everyone. I am John Merriweather, President and CEO of Go Destination Services. We're in the corporate relocation business. We help associates connect with the local community as they're relocating. So we help them with housing and schools and personal interest, family support. Been in business for about 24 years now. We're actually just right down the street from here. And over that time, I've had the really good fortune of working with some of the most iconic brands in the world that we call clients today. Companies like Google, Facebook, many of the car companies, Walmart, now Salesforce. We first got our start with Lilly about 21 years ago. So I'll be speaking today through the corporate relocation lens and how that complements HR and helps achieve the corporate mission. Glad to be here.
Okay, thank you. Everybody welcome our panelists, please. Thank you. A little housekeeping for the folks that are joining us virtually. In order for you to participate, please click on Add Your Voice, and then put your questions in the chat box for our panelists, and we will get to those questions as soon as we can. All right, so just to kick us off, I was just thinking about, when I was thinking about HR, I was thinking about my first graduate class that I took, which was in enterprise risk management. And I remember my professor said to me, the most important assets in any company walk out the door at 5 p.m. And this was during the traditional work style. I won't say how many years ago that was. But obviously, those assets are human beings, human assets. So to kick us off, the first question is it cheaper to keep him or her or to let them walk out? So I would be interested to hear this from John's perspective, from a relocation standpoint, because you know how much it costs to relocate people, right? And then I would be curious to hear from Alicia and then the rest of our panelists as we go along. So
Yeah, sure.
John, let's start.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yes, I'll respond sort of from my day-to-day practice of corporate relocation, but also being a small business owner. So I would say that it's not necessarily cheaper to keep him or her. I think it's very much situational. After 24 years, I've been trained to look at every situation as an opportunity. So if that is the case where we have to have some attrition, then we'll look at that as an opportunity. I would also say that I wouldn't want to sacrifice high performance and support of the company mission for the sake of retention. So our focus is going to be on accomplishing the mission.
Great answer.
And I would say the same, it's situational. The 20% of people statistically, if you look at Gallup polls or those type of polls, people who are disengaged and not bought into your company and their purpose doesn't align or their passion isn't in alignment, then they're not your productive workers. And so you're actually losing, productivity, and those potential people go from disengaged to toxic potentially, right? And so that's hurting your organization. So that segment, I would say it's not cheaper to keep them, it's actually more expensive, especially if they're disengaged and chronically sick, due to stress and all these numbers that we know. And the pre-pandemic was $1.1 trillion of business loss before the pandemic. And I'm going to guess that the numbers are going to be somewhere in $3 trillion once they get enough data to see the last 2 years of disengagement and attrition and all of that stuff. So in that sense, no, it's not wise, but as well, if somebody's, we do stress management. And so we were talking about toxic fog or, brain fog and all these things that us as humans typically have. If it's a period of somebody's life, then you don't want to just get rid of them. If they were a high producing employee before a life event happened and now they're in a period of disengagement, hopefully you can step in and provide some coaching and some mental well-being support to get them back to productive. And sleep is one of the main reasons that us as adults don't have a productive day. So if you can coach people through that with the help of experts and tools like Peak Mind, then you do want to keep that person if they were high producing before, one of your best talent.
Okay, fantastic. Geneva, from your perspective, since you're the one that's bringing new talent in the door.
Right. I mean, we really try to partner with our clients, and to me, it's when I've been brought that question, even as a manager, mentored other managers, I would say, do they have the will or the skill? You can teach the skill, but if they don't have the will, then they will be counterproductive, and they will might damage your reputation even in the market, might damage your brand. But if they have the will, you can teach the skill. Just kind of depends on how big that gap is. So as a recruiter, we try to find both. We're not going to, I'm a search consultant who cares, but it's not from a mushy lovey-dovey thing. It's just like, I'm not wasting the candidate's time. I'm not going to waste the client's time. I'm going to try to find some match that fits both of those entities, cultural-wise as well as growth-wise. Because I don't want to lose a candidate in a company before my guarantee. I got to replace them, right? I'm not trying to keep doing the same job over and over again for free. So I have to make sure that it's a good match. So from my perspective, and I have, as a former purchasing executive too, I was very analytical. I told you all I was an engineer, so forgive me on that. But I did a study on our evaluation of our rotational grads. We would spend, at this other company I won't name, we would spend up to $300,000 per rotational grad, and then couldn't keep them past 5 years. Wow. So are we putting the money, and this is not including the salary. The salary's on top of that. We would spend $100,000 on the ones that wouldn't go around the world. They were just rotating locally, and they wouldn't stay 5 years. So I put some, I did that analysis and I put that question up. So that's one of the ways I think companies should look at kind of your hiring practices and your turnover practices. You need to pay attention and do the numbers, especially manufacturing companies. They pay more attention to the numbers sometimes than they do the people. They'll emotionally feel the people, but if you put that also against the numbers, reevaluate why that's happening. Do people have a voice? Is it a reason why they're disengaged? Do they feel like they can't speak up?
Mm-hmm. Right, that's a really good answer. It makes me think of my first corporate job. I wasn't looking, but I got another offer, and it caught the company off guard, and they tried to counter offer, but by then my mind was already made up.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So they waited too long. Companies do not anticipate the turnover, and that's a mindset that companies really need to get over, especially now.
Yeah,
there's just too many options for individuals.
Absolutely, that's very true. And Sonal, I'm sure you have some.
Yeah, that's right where I come in. Yeah, that's a beautiful,
Emotional
yummy spot
intelligence
for me. Numbers do matter. And in this case, for this, it depends. The answer to that question for me is it depends. Everything that's been said by these amazing people, right, is, if they're not providing value to the organization and they're not showing up, right, and performing, if your answer is no, they're not doing that, then yeah, that's going to depend on, how much it costs. But, to kind of piggyback off of what you were saying, Geneva, numbers do matter, but sometimes I want to take a step back from numbers, right? And I want to look at the people. You know, everything else has been beautifully said. And what I want to add on to that is, are you having conversations with your people? If you're looking at people coming and going from an organization, I encourage, to me, emotional intelligence is pausing. It's pausing, it's reflecting, it's collecting data, right? In the self-awareness. And once you get that information, have those conversations with these people. Why are you staying? What are you interested in? What could I do to keep you? You know, there's a ton of questions. I actually have a list that I do when I do trainings that you can ask and have those conversations. Because if you don't ask, you're not going to receive the information. You're not going to really know. And this is something I always say. We all know what assume means, right? We all know that. Right?
Yes.
But the danger in assumptions is that we put our own storytelling, our own narrative into someone else's situation. And we don't get to do that. It's not up to us. And how do you solve that problem? The emotional intelligence person in me, have a conversation. Communication is key. And once you learn from them what matters, what they need, you can now say, yes, we can provide that or support that, or that's not part of what we do. However, I may know, and then you can finish the conversation. How empowering is that? So even if that person gets to leave and go somewhere else, this is where I come in, they don't have to burn bridges.
Absolutely.
Right? Because when you burn bridges, you never know where those people will show up again somewhere in your life, on your resume, whatever it looks like. So my answer to that is numbers are very important, data is very important, but the people are most important. To finally just press pause and ask them questions and ask what they need and see if you can provide it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. I think emotional intelligence is the foundation to, you know, the rest of the conversations we have in terms of trying to retain employees.
I agree.
So, I know you agree. And Karen, from your perspective, from a legal lens and
legal
also from a
lens.
business
From I thought this was a really simple question, and all of you have proven me wrong. I thought it was a simple question of, yes, it's absolutely harder and more expensive to lose an employee. And I would say, I'm thinking of explicit costs, not all of the implicit costs that they've covered, because a lot of businesses focus on that, because that's when you call the lawyer. Somebody's left, they might be bringing a claim. If you don't have your management that is emotionally intelligent to have those conversations, they aren't going to tell you the truth anyway. Like all of what Sonal just said, I'm like, they're lying because I'm a lawyer and I'm skeptical. Those employees that have one foot out the door are not going to tell you the truth. The last place I left, they didn't ask me any questions like, oh, you bet, because you didn't want to hear the answers. So if you're not willing to hear the answers and be transparent well before somebody's out the door and have actually employee retention policies, you got to way back up the bus on all of those things. And so I would say in this day and age when all of our businesses are trying to hold on to the people they have, it's definitely more expensive to lose them because you can't, you have no certainty that you'll replace them. So I expect most businesses out there are trying to keep the few and the mighty that they have. And my push, and that'll come up, I'm sure, again on this panel, is you're going to have to do less. You're going to have to repivot. And your competitors are doing that, and your competitors are looking at buying you out. Can you buy them out first? Can you merge? Can you grow in a downturn? It's time. Let's have our minority businesses take over the world and buy each other out, because that's what's happening. You're going to have, can you tackle this issue and come out on top in the end?
Patricia, I would like to just, I'm sorry.
Sure, yes.
Karen, that was beautifully
We're
said.
also friends, so it's okay that we're bashing each other.
No, I'm not going to bash you. I think what you said is beautiful, and it's going to come up later, I'm sure, in retention. But you're exactly right. You know, when we talk about emotional intelligence, to me, the translation of that is building, creating, fostering, and sustaining a culture of authenticity and trust. So those questions that I was talking about asking, I think that needs to be embedded and designed inside of the culture and framework so that it's consistent and thorough throughout. So you don't have to wait until afterwards and be a reactive. It's a proactive.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That leads us right into our next question.
Oh, goodness.
And you can start that out. Should companies be investing in employee retention programs?
Well,
and if so, why?
Well, I want to say,
Yes.
heck yeah.
She's bursting. She's bursting now.
This is what I do, right? This is what I love to do. Yes, they need to do that. I mean, I think it's for the obvious that we all mentioned. If you don't do that, you don't keep your talent. And when people, I always say this, and it's very emotional, very fluffy, I know. When people don't feel valued, they won't show up on purpose, and they won't perform, which ultimately leads to success in the organization and company. Mm-hmm. So although it's about numbers and data and how much you make and how successful the company is, it's about the people. And so yes, you have to have these retention strategies, whether you design an internal training and coaching process, or whether you bring in people like our companies and organizations in to come as consultants to see through a different lens and come in and support. That's absolutely essential.
Okay, so I know everybody needs to answer that question, but
Yeah.
can I just ask you from a business's perspective, like a large company that
Yeah.
you're going into, give me the business case for this. Can
So,
you give me the business case so I can invest in this retention policy?
so convince you is what you're saying. I'm coming from the education brain. So are you asking me this or are you asking someone else this?
If anybody else wants to tackle that,
I think-
because that is,
I think you're perfect for it.
Oh, we're all picking on Sonal. I love it.
So what I do when I talk to my organizations is I start very simple. It's a very simple business case. How's everything working? What's working, what's not working? Let's help identify where your gaps are. If you're coming and talking to me, something's off, and that's okay. So let's discuss and figure out what that is. And I usually work with them strategically to figure out what that element is. So if it's communication, if it's people aren't motivated, if it's people aren't inspired, if it's people are having a lot of conflict management on teams, if it's not enough team productivity, whatever it is that they are having, we then take that and we dissect that and break it down to say, how much is this costing you? What is the outcome and consequence of lack of motivation? You know, if they're not coming in and performing, how has that affected your bottom line? And we'll go through that whole process. So I have a whole process that I do, a whole template. And I do that because every single one of my clients, I work from small all the way up to large companies like Roche and Lilly, right? Every single one of them have different, they may have similar issues, but it's different because it's per their culture organization. And the beautiful thing about what I get to do is what I encourage you to do out there is listen. Listen to the information that's being given to you. Not just, okay, cool. All right, so now, and do the same thing. No, that's not listening. Be an active listener and then take that information and show them how that could shift and make the change that is needed. That's how I would pitch it to them, and that's usually what brings them in. And then I give an assessment before and after to collect the data, because data is everything.
yeah. Awesome, fantastic. Does anyone else want to add to that response?
Don't pick on me.
Alicia?
Well, the business case, when you ask for numbers, right, usually the C-suite, CFOs, COOs want to know the number. And so Gallup poll, again, I utilize Gallup, Workplace Wellness Institute. Those are some of the, international polling agencies that, usually poll about 1 million people all across the globe to see some of these numbers. And the last number I saw was, on average in the U.S., it's $28,643 or something like that to lose an employee. Obviously, every company it's different, right? If you staff into high-end, high placement, high-value placement people, you could lose up to $60,000. Or, as we heard, I think it was maybe about $60,000 a year. If you divide 300,000 divided by 5, I think that's math. But it varies, right? It could be smaller or larger depending on who you lose. And so, but it's hard to do what Sonal said. She's right. Everything that she said, we've documented into our action steps in the platform. But the reason that people don't do that, I think most managers know they need to do that. They know they need to be more emotional intelligence, but a lot of people aren't trained in it. Now there's starting to be a lot of social emotional classes that you can take, EI, EQ, IQ, AI, IQ. There's so many different acronyms these days. And so, but it's not scalable scalable. It's not sustainable. You know, I always like to say I love my corporate coaches that we have, you know, in our platform, but Sonal's speaking on our panel, so she can't go coach 10 other companies. So using, you know, the hybrid, like I mentioned earlier, between AI and HR is using AI into a technology like Peak Mind helps you to be scalable and helps a coach like Sonal. You know, I think you're quoted in our platform, I'm pretty sure. And so millions of Americans can utilize Peak Mind platform today and get to hear her wisdom. And then remember to call her. Oh, that's right. We screwed up on that. We lost another person. You know, sometimes you need to be reminded 20 times, right? The average adult needs to be reminded because we forget until that pain is in front of us, until we're calling Karen and we're like, shit, how do we not do this again? We really need the program now, you know? And so the technology is in the millions of moments. And so I know in the AI panel, some people said, well, I don't know about technology. I don't know about AI and how it can really help us. There are ways, you know, you mentioned listening. Again, we're not active listeners as most adults. And so there are technology listeners out there. That's what they're called. And so that's artificial intelligence that can remind you in those moments that, hey, this was the same problem you had 10 times this year, and here's the amount that it's costing you. And so that's what our technology can do, and that's what artificial intelligence can help support us as HR members and leaders to remind us about the great people and how to not make the mistake again.
Okay, thank you for that, for incorporating the AI into this. That's awesome.
Well, from my perspective, you lose your employees, and it's a niche critical role. You're going to have to hire someone like me, and you don't want to have to do that over and over and over again. You know, this might be a role, and I've experienced this firsthand myself. There were certain people, I was like, what am I going to do if this person doesn't show up tomorrow? Because they have such a high technical niche type of background, casting experts. I can tell you there's only so many left in the world. I've got clients that's like, you know, I need X, Y, Z. And I'm like, there's 80 people that can do that in this country. And they don't want to move to Minnesota. So you're going to have to be flexible. And so, you know, from my perspective, you know, the data and the numbers in the sense that, you know, if you're going to have an open checkbook to, you know, work with the external recruiter that specializes in the niche positions, then great for you. But that time that you lose that person, you're losing all of that competitive intelligence and intellect that they might have brought in that door, and now you're going to have to go shop for it again. You're tying up all your leadership and trying to interview this person again. And frankly, you know, it might be to the point where a recruiter doesn't want to work with you because you are turning people over and over again, and that might misrepresent their brand as a recruiter. I wouldn't want to work with a client that can't keep their employees. I can't honestly say that I'd want to bring someone to them if I didn't feel like I could work with them. So I think keeping them and being the company that people want to go to, even if they haven't heard your name, they haven't heard your brand, that's important. You have to kind of build that in to your backbone, to your foundation of being in business. And I will tell you, I will say this, because I had one client do this recently. A lot of clients don't want you to talk to their employees. They don't want you to talk to their hiring managers. As a recruiter, I need to know who they're going to work for, right, before I send the candidate. I had one client let me talk to a current employee in that same role. And that just tells me how confident they are that this person's not going to be saying, oh, can you find me a job since you're talking to me? You know, they're going to be, you know, and this person was warm and welcoming, and that helps me sell that company. Like, this is the company for my potential candidates, because their own people represent them and are free to speak to anyone because they trust them so much that they enjoy also working there.
It's a very good answer. I think, you know, the theme that I'm hearing here is culture.
Yes.
Is very important, and there just isn't enough emphasis on that. And a lot of leadership they don't have the hand on the pulse of culture. Are we exuding the right culture? Are we saying all these things and aligning with them? Or are we saying them so that we can look great? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. John, do you have anything to add?
Well, there's been a lot covered so far, and I agree with all of that. But I think it's right on. I was just going to share a few things that have worked for us at my small little corner of the world. So a few things that have really worked have been the stay interviews, establishing career paths, open and free-flowing communication. I know that's been mentioned already, and I love the way Sonal put that listening is just so critical. We find that within our walls as well as the corporate transferees that we move around the world. But the add on to that is as you mentioned, the action. It's not about just listening; it's about taking action and making sure that is, getting across the finish line. And then really just having and demonstrating that meaningful work, knowing that what we're doing every day from, let's say, from 9 to 5 is meaningful. It is making a difference. Those are some of the things that have really worked for my organization.
Thank you. That's a really good list.
And Patricia, I have one question for the audience. I don't know if the Zoom people can reply, but how many of you are businesses that actually have an employee handbook in place? Okay. And how many of you have, for your managers, an employee retention policy in place? That's rules and regs for how to keep employees. Wow. That's the difference that we're talking about here, is with employee retention, is actually having your managers, once they get to that level, recognize and be trained in addition and have an additional policy about and circulating around this topic of employee retention.
Nice. Yeah, a very good point. I mean, having that guidance, a formal guidance in place for people to go to for employee retention is
And growing
is
your
really
managers, growing.
yeah.
Yeah, growing.
Yeah.
And that's part of the career path as well.
That's fantastic. So I think, most of us as business owners and, as hiring managers and so forth, we are struggling with the current economy and finding the right fit. How do we find the right fit? Why is it so difficult to find the right fit, the right person with the right skills? It seems like it's harder to get both the skills and personality together. I'm just curious to hear your experiences, where you've been successful, and what things you've done to be successful in finding the right skills.
Question for the audience. I think that's a great question for the audience is, how many of you out there are using the same technique, I'll just put that in quotes, when you're hiring? Are you doing it the same way you've always doing it? Yeah,
Have they changed it, yeah?
I'm sorry?
Or have they changed it up?
Or have you changed it up on the how? On how you're actually attracting the people that are applying for jobs. But I hear it all the time. I'm an entrepreneur, so I don't hire myself, but I hear all the time, we're not getting the right candidates. We want diversity. It's in our policy now. How do we attract them? And I'm thinking, well, if you're asking me if I would apply for that job, here's what I need. I need things to be done differently. I need you to look outside of, now I do have college degrees. This is just an example, right? Are you just looking at, you have to have this degree and this degree versus skills assessment? What skills do you bring to the table? And I wanted to do this because I have a really great example, if I may. I have a friend who was applying for a job, a really reputable company, and they had put in their list, you need to have, and they listed all these things. And this person was like, yeah, I'm not going to apply. Forget that. I don't have that, right? And they usually say women more than men are like, oh, I only have 80%. Forget it. I'm not applying, right? And so she didn't apply. And so then the next person that applied and got the job, they had another opening and said, she needs to apply. So she's like, okay. So she went into the interview. And when they asked her about those skills assessments, she goes, well, actually, I don't have a degree in that, but I know enough to be dangerous to show others, but I'm open to learning. And boom, she got the job. So now what if we change up how we attract people and what we put online? Because for myself, I will go, yes, 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 no, never mind, next. And we're now, it's more exclusive than it is inclusive. Right? Yeah. And so that's my recommendation is, how are you doing it? If it's the same as 10 or 15 years ago, you need to dump that. It's just not going to work today.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. And as a matter of fact, I'd love to hear from Alicia on this, because AI is playing a big role as well in narrowing down the pool of candidates. I know, people in the different age groups that are way below me that say, well, we just put all these words in white on our resumes. You can't see them, but we want them to be picked up by the artificial intelligence so that our resume can rise to the top. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yeah, I want to know what that is.
Yeah, they're interesting. And I think the problem that you hear people say with that and the hesitance to use it in the HR field from what we've heard is that you just don't know what's the intrinsic bias, what's built into the artificial intelligence, who wrote the model and the algorithm that's selecting those words. Sometimes it's as simple as you put the job description down, and a reader reads every word, and then it matches people against their resume, which is why some people you read the words that are on the cover letter and are on the job description, and you put them in your resume, 100% match, because you said what we're looking for. So sometimes it's that simple, and those are not biased, right? It's just looking at words for a match so that you can say, okay, these are the best candidates that did say they met, my requirements and what I'm asking for. But the other ones that go deeper, and there's a lot more. We have one in town that's, doing really great Qualify. And that one I think is one of the more reputable ones, right? It's a minority African-American young man, and his brother who have built this algorithm to help for minority and talent that doesn't usually get selected for these jobs. And so he built a model around, let's make sure that there's sometimes it's voice bias. If you're ever doing a voice interview, right, it might be watching your tone and inflection, the listener, again, that artificial intelligence. And so if you have an accent, it may not be able to read and listen to your words. And so you might be screened out even though you're saying the right words. If you're, sometimes certain ones screen you out if you're really speaking really dramatically, right? They can tell the tone and inflection versus, oh, I'm nice and soft and fuzzy, right? And those are also being listened. And so again, you don't know as an HR manager when you're looking at these, you're looking at cost, you're looking at, how many people can I run through this listener and this, AI. So you don't know who wrote that algorithm. And so that's the tricky part that you guys, I feel for you, and right? And so, but asking those questions, getting to know the companies more, because it can help you save time and find more diverse talent if you want to work with somebody like a Qualify that is making sure their technology is able to find more diverse talent that sometimes doesn't speak up because we're systemically, built into not saying and speaking up for ourselves and advocating for ourselves. And so they're really looking at changing that. So there's good ones and bad ones.
Okay.
I would, in my view too, is that AI really can't replace the experience of knowing what is good talent. And having been a hiring manager, I feel like I'm probably one way to kind of get that intention across about diversity and inclusion. There's actually certifications now where you can learn how to find diverse talent. You can learn where they are. So a lot of people will say, I don't know where these people exist. There's kind of all kinds of organizations now, and Facebook groups and corporation ERG groups. There's all kinds of things that you can find out by what people are interested in. Even searching certain types of names. If you really want to find diverse talent, there's really no excuse. I think when it comes to, you got to be creative and intentional, but when it comes to certain types of skill sets too, sometimes you may have a version of that skill set. It might not be that exact program that person is, but this is the competitor to that program. Is it adaptable? Heck yeah. It's not exactly the same, but if they could have learned Oracle, they can learn SAP. If they could do this, they could do that. And it's kind of keeping that net open enough that you're not like, you're going to have to train anyone you bring in some way, shape, or fashion. And I get this sometimes with clients that it takes 6 months to find a material planner. I'm like, how much money did you lose by not having that person 4 months ago? How much inventory did you waste because you didn't have the right person? Was it really necessary for that role to get exactly that ERP system in there? You could have trained that by then.
That's a very good point. The truth of the matter is none of us are born knowing everything we know today.
Right.
So, it's just a matter of being able to decipher and pick out those personality traits that allow you to be a learner, a curious person to want to learn and to learn quickly. So Yeah, I agree with you. John, I saw you.
Yeah,
some
yeah.
notes.
I have the benefit of being down here, and I can just what they said. No, I agree with all of that. That's right on. We do like to, it certainly is more challenging, we think, to find the right candidate these days, and I do like to look at some of the other contributing factors that complement what we've talked about to this point. And I mean, there's a war going on. We're coming out of a pandemic. There's inflation. At different times of the year, there's politics. All these things play a role, right? So I think that we're wise to factor those in when assessing candidates and taking them through a very deliberate vetting process. So that's all I would add, is just some of those other contributing factors that may impact the evaluation process.
Okay. Let's talk about something that maybe we hadn't sort of prepared to talk about, which is, this new work environment, this hybrid and remote work environment, and how that's impacting the candidate pool that we now have. We're now competing, across the nation. It's not like we're competing for a pool of candidates in Indiana and that's it, right? We're competing with companies in New York and California and Washington, in the state of Washington, that is, for the same candidates. How has that impacted your hiring or your ability to hire the right people?
Well, I've heard people say that they're actually being able to bring in great talent from the coast because Midwest living, right? You can buy a bigger house here. You can have a backyard where you can't in other cities and states. And so I've heard of some really high-value candidates coming into Indiana that some of the larger companies have been able to attract in. So I think it kind of works both ways. Expressing your values as a company, Midwest values, the state of Indiana does a good job, right? Visit Indiana. That's their whole campaign, is around why Indiana is such a great place to live. I think Carmel's back up to the #1 city in the country again, so that's great if if that works to your benefit.
Okay. Anybody else want to?
Yeah, that's my sweet spot. We love talking about moving people around the world, and so my typical response, I'll answer through my personal company lens, and then what that means for our corporate clients. So when I think about a work from home arrangement or hybrid, let's say 5 years ago, we were one office. Everyone we recruited was from this local area, within an hour drive or so of the office. Today, we have the same office, but we have employees in 7 states on 4 countries, 4 different countries. So for us as an organization, it's definitely opened that pool of recruitment for our clients, our corporate clients, about the same as well. You do compete from the same talent pool, but it's a much larger pool. So, that it does bring about some other challenges with culture and, engagement and those types of things, policies. And but we think the benefits definitely outweigh. Our volume in terms of corporate relocations is higher than it's ever been, even with work from home options. So, we see, we recognize the challenges of that, and there are obviously plenty of challenges, but the benefits are certainly there and very attractive.
Yeah, I was on a panel about a year ago about when are we returning to normal, and I knew enough, or I'm a crystal ball thinker, and I said on that panel, we're not going back. And now, even a year further out, I'm even more certain of that. So if you are thinking, or your business, maybe the company you work for is thinking it's going to get back to normal, that's poor thinking. And you have the time's up on all of that. And so I say that for a couple of things. I say that about diversity. I'm right there with you, Geneva. Time's up. Been up on that, and it's definitely up now. I was talking with somebody yesterday about we can't find black-owned businesses, and I was like,
What?
then you haven't talked to me before. Majority of my clients are women and minority-owned, and I'm like, if I had a client meeting, there would be all your diversity you need. Like, you're not looking or trying. And then just no tolerance for that. But I'll tell you, one of the things I've realized with the last 2 years and the shutdown and the horrible death rate globally, but in the United States specifically, about 1 million people, right, we've lost. And no, those 1 million people were not your day-to-day employees necessarily. They were predominantly older, et cetera. Not all, as we all know, and have been unfortunately touched by. But all of those million people left behind some kind of asset. Maybe they weren't millionaires, but they left behind a bank account, a house, a car, and they all left behind their legacy, their information, their values, what they instilled in the next generation. And that next generation realized that and is not going to do it anymore. And they're not coming back. And they all called me and set up their single member LLCs to start their business on the side. And as soon as it's profitable, they're quitting their jobs. So I will tell you, it's not going back. There's definitely more autonomy. The USPTO office, which is the Patent and Trademark Office, is slammed. It used to take about 8 months to get your trademark through. It's now 18 to 24 months to get your trademark through because so many entrepreneurs are out there. It was 3 months. It was March 2020. By June 2020, they were calling me, setting up their businesses because they'd been home for 3 or 4 months, and that idea that was brewing, they took off on it. And then we had the mass murder and the murder of George Floyd and the resurgence of civil rights movement, and that snowballed it. And praise be that that's the case, but it's not going back. There isn't a look for that. So what John said about the pool being so much larger and the positives that can come from that, if your company's not shifting and getting ready or reacting and shifting its way to that, you're going to miss out. And that's the fear that I have in instructing clients and seeing businesses as well of you're behind the 8 ball here. In Indiana, it might be a great place to live. I'm not a Carmel person, but it might be a great place to live. But across the country, Indiana has its struggles, right?
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that. Yeah. And I want to be part of making Indiana better. I'm staying. But you got to be realistic and where we're at and what you want and how to shift culture and address this. It's not going back.
Those are some great insights, Karen. I mean, thank you.
Karen's amazing. Karen, you said something that really inspired me, and all of you did, because that's an area where I was like, I want to hear your answers, right? Because I'm not directly in that space. However, the space that I'm in, I'm all about education. Education is my passion. And if any of you are out there, and you don't have to speak up to it or out loud to the people around you, if you're that person that's listening to us and saying, okay, yeah, but normal feels good, or, that's the place that I like to come in, because 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even last year, emotional intelligence, that soft skill stuff, who cares about that, right? Yeah. I mean, I was getting that nonstop. I said, I understand, I hear you. Thank God I did my LLC 10 years ago, because it will come, it will catch up, because people matter. And so I love that you said the word normal, because that is out there, right? What is normal? How do we identify what normal is? It's never been identified. And so if you are someone out there, and I challenge you in a beautiful way, if you're not familiar with things like emotional intelligence, there's a lot of things to study out there. Inclusivity, inclusion, diversity, all of it. I love sense of belonging. That's my favorite part of DEI&B, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Because diversity and equity can be, not always, a check mark and a checkbox. I like to come in to say, great, we've hired them, awesome. Do they feel included? Yes. Do they feel like they belong? That is something that we get to shift to. And the way you do that, and I'll just give the 4 components, please go look it up for yourself, especially if you're leading your organization and company. Self-awareness, the first step to emotional intelligence.
Absolutely.
Self-management. Now that I know, what do I do? Because awareness means nothing if you don't step into action. But what's coming to fruition now, as you were saying, is the social awareness, the third component. What matters to the people around us and the world around us. And the 4th component is relationship management. And that's what you targeted and hit on right there. Because now that we know, you can't unknow.
Right.
And that's where people are afraid. I can't unknow what I already know. So I encourage and recommend everyone out there, no matter where you come from, to educate yourself on today and how we can keep people and help people to feel like they belong when they come in.
Thank you. That was powerful.
I have
All right, Geneva.
I have one thought too, in the sense of how long should you work and how long, who is your ideal employee? And I have some clients who have an ideal employee from a skill set, but that might come in different packages. It could be someone that's almost 65 that normally would be seen that they would be retiring. And they're really ready to start their new life. You know, maybe even through the pandemic, they're like, you know what, I got a whole lot more ahead of me. I survived this. So I'm going back out and I want to get a job. And you have to be able to attract the talent in whatever shape, size, age it comes in, whatever it comes in. That's the other thing that I feel that some clients or some companies have an ideal that's not diverse enough for them.
Right.
So I had to check myself with this because I had a client who wanted this very specific skill set. I found someone. She was hard of hearing, so that's a disability. She, bless her heart, she looked like Bernie Sanders, but a female. So that's not necessarily a disability, but, you know, that was a look. That was, she's on a video interview, right? And I was a little worried about that. And I was just like, not sure how my client's going to take her. They love her. And she told me, she volunteered. I don't know why they want to talk to me. Because I'm almost 65 years old, I'm balding, but I would love to work there. And they hired her. When she interviewed with them, she called me that night, I'd be surprised if you don't get an offer from me. And they offered her the job the next day.
Nice. That's great.
All this
That
was
is
video
fantastic.
interview. So that woke me up because when I first talked to her, because of her, she's been hard of hearing her whole life, she has a certain accent around how she speaks. And I was like, she sounds a lot even older than she is based on that. I coached her on the interview. I coached her on the background. We do a lot of support for our candidates to make sure they're going to have a good experience. And the wild card was how the company was going to be. I had to ask them for special consideration from her because she couldn't read lips if people were wearing masks.
Right.
So we went through a lot of things, but I want to encourage everyone to keep an open mind. You never know what your ideal candidate's going to come packaged as. They may come as the 65-year-old woman that looks like Bernie. You know, bless her heart.
Yeah.
There's hope for
That's
me.
a very good point. I mean, for us at Entrance, we hire a lot of people that are older, that are close to semi-retired or, you know, even retired. And I remember speaking to one of our other consultants that took early retirement and wanted to come and work with us. And I said, well, you know, what about your colleague at the other large company over there? And he said, he looks like Colonel Sanders. I don't know. I don't know how the clients will view him.
Get the job
It didn't
done.
matter to me,
Right.
but
Right, get
yeah.
the job done.
So sorry, I just thought I would share that. John, did you have any comments?
Yeah, you know, I'm just sitting there, you know, as she's talking, I'm just thinking about list of employees. And, you know, I know you talked about a later career professional. I was thinking about the young phenom that we hired many moons back, 18 years old, and was just, you know, you would apply stereotypes to someone who's 18, but you know, he proved the opposite and really rose to the occasion and was quite a star actually. So I definitely support, you know, assessing the package the right way and not prejudging and giving the opportunity. We found great talent that way.
Yeah, so that inclusion is very important
Absolutely.
when you're searching for the right talent.
And
Yeah.
getting training on unconscious biases.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that has to start leadership down.
Absolutely. And we all have it. We all have
We
it.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
We do all have it. I'm going to pause a little bit for some questions from the audience. Is there anybody who has some burning questions for our panel? Or somebody at home maybe virtually joining? Nope. They answered everything like impeccably, of course.
Sure.
Yeah, so here's another question I have. That's me being the audience, right? So I think, you know, one of the challenges that I've seen as we're asking this question about, you know, where do you find the right talent? I think that there's a generational gap, a lack of understanding maybe from certain generations, about, maybe the younger generations, and what motivates them, what wakes them up in the morning to say, I'm going to work. They don't seem to be going to work for monetary purposes. They seem to have I've surveyed the few that we have. It's not that many. And they said, we want to work for a purpose-driven organization. And if you're doing something that's purpose-driven and we feel like we're making a difference, we want to be part of the team. I'm just curious to hear from you all what your experience has been with the younger generations and what motivates them to get up in the morning and to come and work for your company.
You're exactly right, purpose-driven. We've done 3 segments of the college students. Miami University in Oxford, Ohio was the latest one, and it was a social innovation weekend, and students from all over the campus got to choose if they wanted to spend their weekend to come spend 3 days just talking to entrepreneurs like myself who are building companies that are social good companies and innovation and solving human challenges. And in talking to, I went from room to room because I was a mentor and a judge of what they were saying, and I went from every group. I mean, they are so passionate. I mean, that's a representation of the other 2 university groups that we've polled, and every one of them, even if it's not Social Innovation Weekend, they're all talking about purpose and passion, and they're demanding it. That's in our technology, some of our action steps, we've had to write action steps from experts on how, different generations have to listen for those things, how they have to poll, how they have to change their environment to be able to accept, because it's a large population of that group that is rising into the working workforce. And so they are asking for certain things, and they don't all want the Google-esque offices, right? You have to ask them and find out what they want. It's just like all your generations, really understanding, and like we've talked about so much, communication. So comprehension, we say is the first thing. Ask them the right questions, and not just once a year. And the typical engagement survey, always take a pulse check. And if, that's, again, where Peak Mind, we have 365 days that we look at organizational culture, not just once a year. Comprehension goes into compassion, right? Having that compassion for them and not just saying, oh, the millennial generation, oh, they don't listen, they don't do this. Find out why they don't, because there's reasons. They've been developed differently than we were developed, right? And so just having that compassion to understand that it's not right or wrong, it's just a new way of thinking. And, who are we to say that the way that they think and what they demand is wrong?
Yeah, a very good point. And that brings me to my next question, which is, how do you tailor your employee engagement surveys to capture those important things across generations if we're noticing such a vast difference in what motivates people across the generations?
Well, you call us and we do it for you. We've polled enough people, 400 user interviews across the United States, to figure out how to ask those right questions, because not every employee engagement survey asks the questions in that way. So you have to just find out who your organization is and what you want to be and work around that, and work with experts too. I'm sure that they have great insights in what you should be asking, because they're called when you're having issues, right? And so they can help guide you, but before you have issues, here's what you should do, and that can influence what you ask and communicate.
In my personal experience, as a leader, having to share the results of my 360 or employee engagement, I would say oftentimes you felt like you were being attacked as a leader.
Of course, yeah.
Right? And then they're pointing to you like, what did you do wrong that your people said these things? Well, it's to give the leaders also the freedom to explore it for themselves and not use it as a consequence or a slap on their hand, because it might be their reaction to things that are happening to them as a leader that's flowing through to this employee engagement survey. And I felt, I'm free from all of that now, more or less. But I at the time, I would feel like we're all on edge waiting for the results of this employee engagement survey, gonna find out how bad we are. It's kind of like, what is our punishment?
Yes.
So it's kind of like, take that away from this. It's not a punishment, it's an awareness. And share and be open with what can be done. And bring in consultants, bring in support.
Absolutely.
And don't push it on the managers like you're bad managers because your people replied this way.
Yeah.
Because I think that doesn't help the organization improve. That just puts that employee engagement survey in the drawer sooner, and wait till the next one and just pray that, hope and pray, post and pray. That's what we say.
And to that, I've heard that the new best practice is you don't have an annual performance review. You break that up throughout the year, and probably the same with employee engagement. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
The millennials that we've polled said they want weekly
Feedback,
check-ins,
yeah.
Yes.
Real time.
somewhat daily,
yeah.
which
Absolutely.
that's
And
completely
I think
different.
that's one of the generational shifts, and I'll let Sonal talk later, but I get to work with a lot of social enterprises, which just means businesses with a mission. And I said I'd work with mostly women and minority-owned businesses. 10 times out of 10, they have a social mission. They're hiring hard to hire people. They're owned by this. They're solving something that they've identified in their community is missing. It's so rewarding to be just a part of the team of all those different businesses I get to work with, and that's definitely where things are going. So highlight that. Brag. If you're not used to it, brag about yourself. You're probably already doing that. Your corporation gives charitably. Yes, you get a tax benefit. I appreciate that. But you already are doing it. And so learn, if you're not already, brag about that. That's part of keeping your employees and getting that connection and social driven. But last week I was at a networking event and talked with a business, a large, he's not large, but his business is large. And he was talking about an employee survey they did with a video, and they were videoing a millennial. And they asked him, do you think you're fairly compensated? And he works in the car industry, service industry. And the kid was like, today I feel fairly compensated. And they said, well, why today? Why not another day? He's like, well, on a day when we're really slammed, I'm not paid enough. And the owner was just dumbfounded. That was the end of the interview. He's like, what do we do to that? Already, like, are you kidding? You're too busy, and then it's not fair anymore. And this whole, there's just such generational missteps. And I hear it from lawyers in law firms of our new associates, they're millennials, and they don't understand timing and deadline, and they don't follow up. They don't, if you can figure this, to your question, I go, if anybody has a solution to this, they're golden, because it is such a rub in from, blue collar, white collar, professional, whatever it is. So that concept of weekly feedback, rewards in shorter periods of time, not an annual bonus. I don't think an annual bonus is going to keep you're going to have to break that up and absolutely pivot now to keep the young folks involved.
It's a developmental challenge I don't think we understand. I do 7 years of research in neuropsychology and neuroscience, and so I have a prediction that in a couple of years we're going to get studies that show, because it's already trending that way, that this generation, again, we develop them differently. Think about, they were born with technology.
Right.
We handed them a phone. We handed them a device, right? We handed them that. And what that does to your neuropsychology when you're a baby is it doesn't develop your brain as much, because you're looking at something and you're not talking. You're not touching grass. You're not touching rocks. If you look at brain balance, we've got 3 or so locations here in Indiana, right? They're trying to treat children and adults who have underdeveloped brains, and it's because of when they were babies. If you crawl too early, that stunts your development in other motor skills, right? It's a fine balance, our beautiful brains. And so if we think about the millennials as not developmentally challenged, right? Don't say that to them, but think about that, right? If somebody had a hearing disability like Geneva talked about, we wouldn't look at them as, oh gosh, what'd your parents do to you? But so why are we treating this generation as that? We had a say in how their development is. It's part of our responsibility in how we brought them up, right? And how we raised them, and teachers too, and obviously other things. But the data is going to start to come out that's a lot of how their brain is underdeveloped, because they didn't say as many words as we had to as kids, right? We had to go play in the street and have conflict with each other and take the basketball and yank it and yell at somebody, right? We were all grown up that way, most of us in this room, but they didn't. So that's, their brain just didn't get to the point of where we had to as our development.
Sure, and the constant barrage of information, it never stops
Right.
coming their way.
Right.
And sound bites. They get information in sound bites now.
Yeah.
The attention span is just not there.
Right.
This is a big challenge. They are
Forget
going to
about
be in
Cliff
charge.
Notes, huh? We thought that was our sound bite.
They don't know what Cliff Notes are. They don't know what that is.
If anybody here knows what shorthand is, we're old. Yeah.
I just wanted to add to all of this awesome, because I'm just absorbing and taking it all in, so I think it's amazing stuff. Just to to piggyback or to kind of confirm some of the things that I heard that I wanted to just tap into is celebrate feedback. You know, change the perspective of what feedback is. It's not critical, it's not judgment, it's feedback. And so when you create that environment in your workspace and talk about celebrating feedback, and I'm going to add one layer to that, celebrate failure.
Yes.
Because when you celebrate failure, people don't feel bad.
Or fear it.
Or fear it. People around you, you won't remember what you learn, you'll remember what you feel. It's just a reality. And so if you start incorporating that into your workplace culture, and one of the biggest things with assessments, it's interesting you said that, is I'm starting to now design and create assessments and push them out to my clientele. And that was hard for my brain, right? I'm not an analytical brain. I am in DISC, I'm a high I. I'm an ENFJ, you know. That means I'm extremely social. I don't know if you can figure that out. But, and so for my brain, when people start getting into data and Excel and numbers, I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing, right? And so I say that with pride because I used to say that with, I don't know very much about numbers, right? And now I'm saying, no, I don't, but here's what that means. What that means is this is my gift, and here's what I bring to the table. And therefore, I'm going to hire, for me, a consultant that will help me design my assessment tools because that's their gift. And so now I'm not only tapping into talent, I'm encouraging them and empowering them to show up with their talent, and we're all enough.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I encourage any organization or company out there, if you're wondering that you have to be the expert at everything, I feel for you. Because that's a lot of pressure. Stay in your lane and delegate.
Truly is. Thank you. That's really good advice. Stay in your lane and delegate. I need to learn that myself. I try to do everything. Anybody else have something to add to that? Audience, any questions with regards to employee retention and employee engagement? Your companies do it well. Stacy. Okay. So I guess how we do it? We're supposed to end that? Oh, good. Yeah. I still have a lot of questions. Okay. All right. What are some of the benefits of tracking your employee turnover rate
Well, one, I don't know if companies have heard is
and retention rate?
sometimes you can use those if you have good retention. We know that workforce insurance numbers, right? We, as companies, we are charged more if we're having a high turnover rate because of our workforce and workforce insurance. But you can get discounts with some of your company expenses if you have lower turnover. And it's not every company, but there are certain ones in the car. If you have a lot of your staff goes out and drives, insurance companies will give you a lower rate on your insurance premiums if you show those numbers. So there's going to be some in the insurance arena. There's going to be more numbers like that, and more discounts that correlate directly to how happy and engaged your employees are, because we know that happy, healthy people are not causing the insurance litigation issues as much.
That's a perspective I didn't even think of. You know, that's a direct cost.
I looked at it, obviously, in my past life. I looked at it a lot when I saw, again, like with the graduate rotational program, I was responsible for the global program and the local United States program. And I just thought about the investment, the turnover of the investment that we kept making every year for not growing kind of that pipeline of leaders that we thought we were going to grow. So I thought it was very important to track it. And then I tracked it not just from those new hires from college, I tracked it internally. And from every hire that we did, that's when I noticed that pivotal time frame is if they don't stay 5 years, they're not going to stay past that. So we had a huge turnover, about every 3 years, we're turning over 25% of the people. Think about how much that money that is, the cost to retrain somebody, and it takes 6 months to learn the job and the systems and so on. And we had 25% of that going out the door basically every year. So if they stay past 5 years, then the engagement showed that 8 years, if they stayed 5 years, they're going to stay 8, but then the engagement went down. Then they just kind of lost faith in their life in the world, and they're showing up as zombies, so they're not adding value there either. So what I hope that when I did that analysis, and we talked about it as a leadership team back then, it was really to figure out how to stop the bleed, you know, and that much money being turned over. And maybe some of that early career investment could go into also retaining the current employees that were checked out and becoming zombies after 5 years.
That's a great perspective. 25% is obviously unacceptable. Did you get to a point where you determined?
She was a part of the 25%.
You left, okay.
I left and started TELUS Executive Search. I told them what they needed to know. I helped them that much, and then I left.
Is there an acceptable? Because nobody gets to keep somebody people forever. Right. So I'm just wondering if there's, in the HR world, is there this acceptable rate that's okay?
Single digits is probably more normal.
Some companies I hate the term, cut the fat, right? 20% every year. I don't think that's acceptable, but that's some companies' policies that they just know that there's always going to be that segment that is either not productive or looking to leave, and so they can identify and outplace them. But I agree. I think the lower the number, because most people, the average nobody's profitable for you until like a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a mark, right, that can be tracked. And
You're
so
right.
You need to keep them, and then you want to keep those people because that has your wisdom and your value and your company IP, right? Your intellectual property, all your company assets are a lot of them in their brains.
Right, and aging out. And I would say, you talked about one kind of insurance, but, employment practices, if you're working in anything that's giving, any kind of professional services, all of those things, if you're turning folks over, you're going to see the trends of who's leaving your company. Is it a certain demographic? And then that's where I come in, and you're like, okay, that puts you at risk of a lawsuit from older folks or a different age or race or those types of things. And so I think tracking and having more information for your management team or your managers is definitely helpful, because you can predict. And I think one of the things that you said at the beginning, Geneva, I thought was so wise was companies don't anticipate departures. Why the heck not? How many people have had people leave their company? Every single guy like that. What's going to happen. And I'm, in the business of risk, trying to lower your risk. Change. Are we all sure that change is happening? It's going to happen. It was always going to happen. Did I predict the pandemic? No. But I know, we all know change is happening. Change is going to come. You're going to have attrition. You're going to have people that you like. So stop it. Get in front of it. Don't be that company that doesn't predict people are going to leave. And no one's working at GM for 40 years anymore. No one in this room, even if you do have some gray hair, it's not that kind of world anymore. So it's going to happen. Get in front of it. Have those policies, and if you're tracking it, that can all be helpful to be push it back and get before you talk to the lawyers, get the right insurance policies in place around all of this. Did anybody go to the cybersecurity today? Because that's another huge risk with employee turnover. You have to retrain on all of that, and that exposes your business to. I went through a ransomware attack with a company, hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of hours, customer impact relationships and audits that follow. It's horrible. And if you don't have dedicated, engaged employees, they're going to click on that phishing email, and that's it. And so that's a whole nother segment that is tangential to this of risk that you're exposing your company to.
Oh, that's sobering.
I'm the downer. Sorry.
No, you're the
I'm absolutely the downer.
You're the reality check. Karen's our reality check.
So constantly be developing your employees, training them on the risks. A lot of companies think that's information that only needs to be known in the C-suite, but it needs to be known all the way down, and it has to be constantly communicated and re-emphasized with
Read Everything by Malcolm Gladwell. That's my take on all the things.
Absolutely. So what do you think in terms of employees? Do you think they are being honest about the culture that their company's culture, or are they just projecting the culture that they would like the company to have?
I
Do you
think
think employees or management are being honest about the culture?
Yeah, which,
Both. Because management can also lie to itself about, this is what we want to be, but then they behave a different way.
I think
So.
it's going to depend, and I don't know if this helps answer the question or not, but as soon as you said that, it made me think that's why it's so critical to celebrate failure and to celebrate feedback. Because if you do that in your organization, then I feel, and I haven't experienced this, so this is where these awesome humans come in, then I feel that someone's going to be more real and authentic and share about what's there and what's not there and what we need. Right? I feel like that's going to be a culture and an environment where they're going to want to be able to do that a little bit more. So are people fully honest? I think it depends on the culture that's provided in that organization. If they're in an organization that they're like, I better not open my mouth because it's going to have consequences, then no. And if you are the one interviewing them and and here's the intelligence, I don't care if it's EQ or IQ, if you know that culture and that organization is not set up that way, then don't take everything they're saying at face value. Do your research. Find other ways to get that information and not say it to them. I know you're not telling the truth. No.
It probably doesn't go over very well.
Right? But, thank you for your information and feedback. And maybe, just maybe, design your questions to be yummier. Like really just juicy, so tell me. If I could give you and set up a template of questions. I'm a queen of templates. And because once they start working, you use them over and over again. And now, maybe not the first time they're going to be fully honest, but then when their friend goes, oh, you're next. I'm next? Yeah, they're going to ask you some good questions. Really? You should tell them. Okay. Because I'm telling you, that flows in an organization. So maybe right up front, no. But it's 100% possible, in my opinion, by building and developing your culture, and maybe, depending on how large your organization is, standing up in front of your people and saying, here's my intention. Here's my purpose for each of you in our company. Share with me. How do you feel about that? If you're not going to show up as an authentic leader, you can't expect your people to be authentic.
Yep, that's very true.
And I feel like there might be really good culture in certain teams within our organization. Like my department's good, but it's not replicated everywhere. So you have people with very dissimilar experiences within the same company, depending on how large your organization is.
And identify those, right? So by doing that, you get to identify those, and then you get to spread it out. And I don't even want to say the word virus because the science person in me would have said that, but no more will I ever say that again. So that's mine.
Yeah, that's building psychological safety, making people feel like they can fail, they can share their experience, and there's blogs on our website all over the internet about how do you build that within organizations. I think they say that to get a creative idea, you have to throw out at least 30 ideas. Is the law of average. So which manager tells their team that? I know 29 of these ideas are going to be crap. Let's just stick them out there. The more we throw out, the more, quicker we get to the one, right? That's helping people understand that we all have bad ideas, so we know that let's just keep throwing them out there, because if you don't build that, then nobody says any ideas. And that's why a lot of companies can't innovate. That's why they can't grow and they're not sustainable and scalable. And so use that neuroscience, again, to your advantage, like Sonal said, and be curious. Curious conversations is what she's talking about. Read, again, there's blogs and articles about what are curious conversations, what are some of these sentences I can say to open up. I like to say, instead of saying, how was your weekend? I try and throw people off sometimes. So I'll say, did your dog eat anything crazy this weekend that the dog shouldn't have eaten? Right? Change up the normal things that we say. Hey, how are you today? Right? Because you don't answer that. So say something else, because that stops people and says, oh, he did eat something, that damn dog, And then right now you have a different perspective on that person, and you have a different conversation, and you're building a different relationship. So those are some of the things I think of and that we see a lot.
Fantastic. You kind of have to know, though, that, I wonder if a third party can help you, take the temperature of your culture so your employees can be honest, truly honest. She's got something to say about it.
Because I told you they're liars from the very beginning.
Sorry.
They're liars.
I need to say this part only, and I apologize. As soon as you said that, I was naive in starting in my career in this position when a company did invite me in for that purpose. and I follow through. I'm passionate. And I was like, let's do this. And I finally, the employees were excited to share. They actually shared from their souls.
Yes.
And I collected the data, and I turned around, and I said, here, leaders who invited me, and they said, we just did it because we just needed you to, we had to check that. I looked and I said, do not invite me next time you're going to do that.
Yeah.
So to me, that was an example of if you bring people from the outside in, I always check with the senior leadership before I go in and saying, what is your genuine and true purpose, and what's your follow-through going to look like? Because then I won't be the bad guy. Because I felt for those employees that said, okay, we gave you this information, they're not doing anything with it, and I didn't have the heart, I wasn't back there to tell them, yeah, they didn't care about it. They just did it because they wanted to check a box. And that's real.
No, it's very common. We've experienced it where they did some.
That just rubbed me the wrong. I was like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm out.
Yeah. Actually, in a certain situation, HR just cleansed the data. They didn't even want the leadership to know the feedback because I think they felt like it would fall back on them. Well, why are you allowing us to do this? Why do our employees feel this way? Yeah. You know, is it because of the work that you guys are doing? You're supposed to be helping us. You're HR. Right? So, yeah, that's very common.
Yeah,
John, you're itching to
Go ahead,
talk
John.
as well.
Oh, you can.
I was just going to share about celebrating failure. You might not want to call it failure. I say challenges, and that gets to the same point. But I worked at a law firm that wouldn't only wins. They would only celebrate wins. And somebody asked me, what do you want to highlight this quarter? I'm like, either my client that's going through a sexual harassment claim or my client who's in a lawsuit and is probably going to lose. Which one do you want to share? And they're like, oh, yeah, you don't get to share this month. It was like, that's what lawyers deal with, right? And so sure enough, one of the lawyers at our firm did something that went poorly, and it caused a malpractice claim, and our malpractice insurance increased, et cetera, et cetera. I only heard about that through the grapevine. What if I do that same thing?
Right.
I didn't have any notice. So they did not take the opportunity to share what not to do or how to get around that, and you risk repeating it. And instead, they're like shameful about it.
Learn from
But guess what? I heard about it through the grapevine, meaning everybody was talking about it anyway. Like they absolutely shot themselves in the foot. So companies, that's what celebrating failure looks like, is who thinks they're going to make a mistake ever again in their lives? You know it's good. You're absolutely going to have employees. They're all going to make mistakes. I'm going to make mistakes today. How many mistakes? So stop the punishment and the Obviously, I say that with if you do have employees that have sexual harassment issues and you do need to terminate, there's obviously exceptions. And in highly regulated industries, you can't share all of the details, and you can make it anonymous. You can do it. You have to do it the proper way, but you absolutely have to do that. They're all talking about it behind your back anyway, and that disintegrates good culture.
So transparency without
Yes.
releasing confidential information.
Absolutely. There's
That's
definitely
really
ways
what you're
to do it,
saying.
and you can do it really briefly and a need to know and all of that. But you can call me and do it in a privileged environment. You can do lots of different ways, but do it. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, thank you. That's perfect. I think there is a freedom and a power that comes with that type of transparency. And I just wanted to go back to culture for a brief moment and mention an exercise we did a couple years ago that was really powerful and still has results today. So at one of our kickoffs a couple years ago, we broke down in smaller groups and said, okay, let's be very intentional this year about what type of culture do we want to create. And in preparation for today, I grabbed one off a cubicle, and I brought it. And I just want to read a few of the things that the team said. These are the things that they want, and then we actually came up with a list of things that we don't want. So I'll just throw out a few: flexibility, work-life balance, recognition, positive reinforcement, charitable culture, family first, supportive environment. Then we took it a step further and said, here are things that we don't want: negativity, drama, micromanagement, favoritism, dictatorship. And a few other things, right? And so this was a couple years ago, and it still acts as a guide today. But I do thank you. I do on first days of an associate joining our company. I do that first hour, and the majority of that is about culture. and we go over this and some other things, and there comes a, as I'm describing, here's the type of culture. This, it sounds really good, right? They're nodding. Oh man, this sounds awesome. In real time, I'm thinking about some of the gaps that we have in this. So there does come a point when I say, now, we are working on these things on a daily basis because I don't want to create the impression that this is the perfect culture.
Right.
That we're not perfect. We're working on these things. They have our full attention every day, and I think that gives me a little bit of freedom to say that, to create the expectation that you should expect some positive things going forward after today from this culture. But it is a work in progress. We have to be very intentional about it every single day.
That's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human, but there are things that we aspire to, and I think if everybody understands that, they can fall in line, so to speak. So since we are right up on 3 o'clock, are there any last comments that you would like to share with the audience virtually and that are here in person with regards to, I think we've centered our discussion around people, retention, and I guess intention, really, around how to retain people and, find good people, the right fit. Are there any parting lessons that we can share with the audience?
I would like to do a shameless plug.
Absolutely.
I talk about building your tool belt. It's great to learn and have knowledge and to receive information from people. The hardest part is how. Like when you walk away from this space, how do you go back into your own life and make it a lifestyle change, right? You talk about this all the time when it comes to health and wellness. So I just wanted to share that I created this book, this workbook during COVID when everything got shut down. And it is teaching you 7 steps to stretch beyond your comfort zone in life and work. And the reason I did this is because of everything we're talking about today. It walks you through step by step how. It gives you tools. It asks you questions. It gives you an opportunity to step into awareness and figure out what your action gets to look like. So this, and then the other thing, and Daryl, this is why Daryl asked me to bring this in today, is after 5 years of interviewing C-suite, and learning that, just because I'm an extrovert doesn't mean everyone else is. And I know that because I do that. I do work in that space. But when I go to anyone, I can say, you're amazing. And I genuinely mean that. I can go to there's no strangers for me. And I never really honed in on, wait, some other people may have that same feeling, but they don't know how to say it, or they don't feel comfortable saying it. So I interviewed all these humans and found out all the things they would love to say if they had either the courage to say it or the time to say it. And so I created this deck of cards, and it's called value cards. And actually, Alicia was one of my first supporters. And you get a 30 in a deck, and what they do is they celebrate people, everyone in your team and business. So they have things like the back says, I value, their value cards, and the front says, I value that you're great at taking initiative, that I value that you make a difference. I value that you're a savvy problem solver. And I have this deck designed so that organizations and leaders and colleagues can celebrate. You can hand it to them. That's the intention. Do not keep this deck with you forever. Pass them out. Put them in the mail. I always say thank you cards to people in my life, and I put one of these in there so they know how I receive them and perceive them, because that's powerful. We can all walk around saying, I want to be known for being a great leader, and you can have a lot of people whispering behind your back going, not happening, right? So I want to know. And so these decks of cards, and then the second deck, which Aisha is out there selling, she's my partner in this, is the same concept, except for this is now for everyday people, not just work people, but you can also give it to strangers or someone at the coffee machine. People need to receive, I would have called them, I see you. But that would have been creepy. So I call them value cards, which means I see you and thank you for showing up, and I'm going to celebrate that. So I just wanted to put that out there. If you're seeking tools to support what you want to do to support others, feel free to let me know.
So I'm going to let you know right now, I want to buy some. But let our audience, our virtual audience, know where they can find this.
You can go to my website. I'm going to give you 2 ways to get there. It's my name. It's a long name, Sonal Chef Zawahri. If you're online, you can see our names.com. Or here's the easier way, haveyoustretchedtoday.com. And in my shop section, you'll see all of this.
Okay,
So
go
thank
get some
you.
for yourselves and your
Follow me on
colleagues.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
No last parting words?
Oh, last parting words.
Very short. Let's just keep it short.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
My last parting words are my favorite quote, and I feel like that's who we are right up here today, is Maya Angelou's quote: "People will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel." And I feel
fantastic.
that, that's the way you retain and empower and engage employees, is that way too.
That is powerful.
And I like to say, give yourself grace. Remember that most of us didn't grow up learning this type of stuff that we're talking about today. And so, yes, we go to these 1-hour classes, once every quarter or year, but give yourself grace, right? Because it's a lot for us to retain that there's a lot of tools, right? If her cards are this thick, there's a lot of things we should be saying. Use the tools, use the companies, technologies that are trying to make your lives easier, but give yourself grace.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I would go to. We covered a lot of ground today. I learned a lot. I took some notes over here. I got some things to work on. And I would just say, with all the ground we covered today, just keep the action moving forward. Don't expect all of these things to take place overnight. Just keep the action moving forward and have small wins every day, and you'll be okay.
Thank you. Karen?
That's what I would say, what John said. Keep it moving. My motto in life is go big or go home, because none of us make it out of here anyway. And so while there's definitely risks to be avoided, and that's when you call me, there's absolutely, so many things are possible. And this was a great panel to be a part of and a lot of fun to share today.
It was. Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
This was
Patricia.
extremely insightful. I know I learned a lot for my business as well, and I will probably be contacting most of you after this. So I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
So much for our panel.
Thank you, Patricia.
You are most welcome.
We want to say thank you to Patricia.
I think this coincided with a lot of matchmaking events. So, but I think we have it streamed somewhere, so people can watch it after the fact.